There exists a twilight realm between history and imagination, a liminal space where the stories our ancestors whispered around flickering fires blur with fragments of actual events. In every culture, across every continent, humanity has preserved tales that seem too fantastical to believe. Stories of flying machines and underwater cities, of gods who walked among mortals and civilizations that vanished overnight, of maps that show lands no ancient people should have known existed, and technologies that seem impossibly advanced for their time. For centuries, we dismissed these stories as mythology, beautiful, instructive, culturally significant, but ultimately fictional. The rational mind of the modern age drew a clear line between fact and fable, between archaeology and fantasy. Ancient legends were considered allegories, teaching tools, the primitive attempts of unsophisticated peoples to explain a world they didn't understand. We smiled indulgently at tales of flying chariots and underground kingdoms, of visitors from the stars and islands that appeared and disappeared from the ocean, filing them safely away in the category of myth. But something remarkable has been happening over the past century. As archaeological techniques have advanced, as satellite imaging has revealed hidden structures, as underwater exploration has discovered sunken cities, and as ancient texts have been translated with fresh eyes, a pattern has emerged. Some of these impossible legends have proven to be rooted in truth. Troy was considered pure mythology until Heinrich Schliemann's excavations proved it was a real city. The biblical accounts of Jericho were dismissed as religious fancy until archaeologists uncovered walls that had indeed fallen. Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories of coastal flooding have been validated by geological evidence of post-Ice Age sea level rise. Norse sagas of Vinland were thought to be exaggeration until ruins of Viking settlements were found in Newfoundland. Time and again, legends have pointed the way to actual discoveries. This raises a profound question. If some myths were memories, how many others might be? If Troy was real, what about Atlantis? If Vikings reached America centuries before Columbus, what about ancient maps showing Antarctica without ice? If oral traditions can preserve accurate information for 10,000 years, what other truths are hidden in the stories we've dismissed? The legends we're about to explore occupy this fascinating borderland. They're not proven history, not yet, but they're not pure fantasy either. Each has elements that correspond to archaeological discoveries, scientific anomalies, or historical patterns that can't be easily explained away. Each suggests that our ancestors might have witnessed something real, something extraordinary, and preserved it in the only format available to them: story. Some of these legends come from cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, yet they tell remarkably similar tales. Others describe technologies or knowledge that seem impossible for their time period, yet evidence suggests some capability existed. Still others point to specific locations where unusual artifacts or structures have been found. Artifacts that don't fit comfortably into our understanding of ancient capabilities. We're not claiming these legends are definitively true. We're not abandoning scientific rigor or embracing pseudo-archaeology. But we are opening ourselves to the possibility that the ancients were better observers, better record keepers, and more capable than we've given them credit for. We're acknowledging that the line between myth and history is blurrier than we once thought, and that some of the most persistent legends might persist because they contain a kernel of truth too important to forget. So, let's journey into that twilight realm. Let's examine ancient stories with modern eyes, looking for the places where legend and evidence intersect. Let's uncover 10 ancient legends that might not be myths at all, but echoes of a forgotten reality. The lost kingdom of Zakiku, the city that rose from the Tigris. The Tigris River in northern Iraq, its waters brown with silt, flowing as it has for millennia through the cradle of civilization. The year is 2022. After one of the worst droughts in decades, the waters of the Mosul Dam Reservoir have receded dramatically, exposing mudflats that haven't seen sunlight in 40 years. And emerging from the sediment like a ghost materializing from morning mist is a city. The archaeologists who arrived to document the discovery couldn't believe what they were seeing. Stone walls, buildings with multiple rooms, fortifications, storage jars still sitting where they were placed thousands of years ago. This wasn't a simple village or seasonal camp. This was an urban center. And based on pottery styles and cuneiform inscriptions, it dated to the Mitanni Empire, a Bronze Age kingdom that flourished around 1500 BC, but had been almost completely forgotten by history. The discovery sent shockwaves through academic circles because it validated something scholars had long debated: the existence of Zakiku, a city mentioned in ancient texts but never definitively located. Cuneiform tablets from other Mesopotamian sites occasionally referenced Zakiku as an important administrative and economic center on the banks of the Tigris, a key node in the trade networks that connected the ancient Near East. But without physical evidence, many historians remained skeptical. Cities in texts are easy to invent. Physical ruins are harder to fake. Now, here was potential proof, a substantial settlement in exactly the right location, from exactly the right time period, with characteristics matching what the ancient sources described. The city featured sophisticated architecture, including fortified walls, suggesting it held strategic importance. Storage facilities indicated it was a center for collecting and redistributing agricultural produce. The presence of cuneiform tablets confirmed literacy and administrative complexity. In every way, this drowned city matched what Zakiku should have been. But the discovery raises haunting questions. How many other legendary cities lie hidden, preserved by accident of geography or climate? The Mesopotamian plain was densely populated in antiquity, home to hundreds of settlements, large and small. Many were abandoned when rivers shifted course, when irrigation systems failed, when political powers collapsed. Some were deliberately destroyed. Others simply faded away as populations migrated. The physical remnants, mud brick structures in an environment of wind and water, don't endure well. Within decades, a substantial city could be reduced to low mounds of dirt, indistinguishable from natural features. The legends, however, persist. Ancient texts mention scores of cities whose locations we've never confirmed. Some may be alternative names for known sites. Others may be exaggerations or inventions. But the sudden appearance of Zakiku suggests a third possibility, that many of these legendary cities were real, their ruins simply waiting for the right conditions to reveal them. There's a particularly poignant aspect to this discovery. The city emerged because of drought, a modern climate catastrophe. The same drought that exposed these ancient ruins is devastating current communities, destroying livelihoods, forcing migrations. It's a reminder that the cities we build are no more permanent than those of the ancients. Climate can preserve or destroy. Water can hide or reveal. And what we consider solid and eternal, our cities, our civilizations, our certainties, can vanish as completely as Zakiku did, leaving only legends for future generations to debate. The archaeologists worked frantically to document as much as possible before the waters returned. They knew the city would be submerged again, protected by the reservoir from looting, but also inaccessible for further study. In a way, Zakiku would return to legend, visible only in photographs and reports, a place that emerged from myth long enough to prove itself real before disappearing once more into the depths. And if Zakiku is real, what else might be? What other cities from legend lie waiting beneath water, sand, or soil? The ancient world was larger, more complex, more interconnected than our fragmentary archaeological record suggests. The legends remember what the earth has hidden. And sometimes, if we're patient and fortunate, the earth gives up its secrets, if only for a moment.
The Anunnaki, the gods who taught humanity. Ancient Sumer, the world's first recognized civilization, rising from the marshlands between the Tigris and Euphrates around 4000 BC. Here, writing was invented. Here, the wheel was first used. Here, mathematics, astronomy, law codes, and urban planning were developed. The Sumerians themselves attributed much of this rapid advancement to the Anunnaki, beings they described as descending from the heavens to teach humanity the arts of civilization. In Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were a group of deities associated with the creation of the world and humanity. They were said to have arrived from the celestial realm, bringing with them knowledge of agriculture, metalworking, writing, and governance. The myths describe them as physically present, walking among humans, interbreeding with them, ruling over the first cities. After teaching humanity these crucial skills, the stories say they withdrew or transformed, leaving humans to govern themselves. For most of history, these were clearly myths, obvious attempts to explain cultural advancement through divine intervention, not fundamentally different from any other creation mythology. But certain details in the Sumerian accounts have caused some researchers to wonder whether something more complicated might be embedded in these stories. The level of detail in Sumerian astronomical knowledge is remarkable. They tracked planetary movements with precision, divided the sky into constellations, understood the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes 26,000 years to complete. How did an early civilization, supposedly primitive by our standards, accumulate this knowledge? The Sumerians themselves said the Anunnaki taught them. If we strip away the mythological language, could this be a cultural memory of an earlier, more advanced culture sharing knowledge with a less developed one? The sudden appearance of Sumerian civilization is one of archaeology's persistent mysteries. Unlike Egypt, where we can trace a clear developmental sequence from simple villages to complex kingdoms over thousands of years, Sumerian civilization seems to emerge relatively quickly, with many advanced features already in place. Within a few centuries, they go from scattered agricultural communities to sophisticated city-states with writing, monumental architecture, complex bureaucracies, and extensive trade networks. It's not impossible. Cultural development can accelerate under the right conditions, but it's unusual enough to have prompted theories about external influences. Some researchers, most famously Zecharia Sitchin, have proposed controversial interpretations of Sumerian texts, arguing that the Anunnaki were not gods but extraterrestrial visitors who genetically engineered or culturally uplifted early humans. These theories are not accepted by mainstream archaeology. They require reading ancient texts hyperliterally, ignore linguistic and cultural context, and make assumptions unsupported by evidence. But they've captured popular imagination precisely because they try to explain genuine puzzles in the archaeological record. Setting aside the extraterrestrial hypothesis, there's a more grounded possibility worth considering. Could the Anunnaki legends preserve memories of an earlier, sophisticated culture, perhaps survivors from the catastrophic end of the Ice Age? We know that by 10,000 BC, complex societies existed in nearby Anatolia, as Göbekli Tepe demonstrates. We know that climate catastrophes around this period displaced populations and disrupted cultures. Is it impossible that some of these displaced peoples, carrying advanced knowledge with them, might have migrated to Mesopotamia and been remembered as culture-bringing gods? Ancient peoples often deified their benefactors, their ancestors, their teachers. Over generations, real historical figures become mythological. King Arthur was likely based on a historical Romano-British leader, but accumulated layers of magical embellishment until the real Arthur became impossible to distinguish from the legend. Could the same process have transformed memories of skilled teachers into divine beings descending from heaven? There's also linguistic evidence worth noting. The Sumerian language is a linguistic isolate. It doesn't clearly relate to any known language family. This suggests the Sumerians either developed in isolation for a very long time or came from somewhere we haven't identified. Either way, it hints at a more complex origin story than the simple "they developed in place." The truth is probably more nuanced than either the pure myth interpretation or the ancient astronaut theories. The Anunnaki legends likely combine multiple elements: genuine cultural memories of knowledge transmission from older cultures, mythological accounts of powerful historical rulers, religious symbolism encoding philosophical concepts, and, yes, pure imagination. Untangling these threads may be impossible, but the core suggestion that Sumerian civilization benefited from knowledge passed down from an earlier source is not inherently unreasonable. In the end, the Anunnaki remain what they've always been: enigmatic figures at the boundary of history and myth, reminding us that cultural development is complex, that knowledge can be transmitted across generations in unexpected ways, and that the stories ancient peoples told about their origins might contain more truth than we've been willing to acknowledge.
Istanbul, 1929. Topkapi Palace, repository of Ottoman treasures. A German theologian named Gustav Adolf Deissmann is cataloging historical documents when he comes across a fragment of a map drawn on gazelle skin. The cartographer's name is noted: Admiral Piri Reis, a 16th century Ottoman naval officer. The date, 1513. But as Deisman examines the map more closely, his excitement builds. This isn't just another medieval chart. This is something extraordinary. The map shows the Atlantic Ocean with surprising accuracy, including the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and South America. But it's what the map shows in the southern region that has caused decades of controversy. The southern continent depicted on the Piri Reis map appears to show features of Antarctica, a continent that wouldn't be officially discovered until 1820, over 300 years after the map was drawn. Even more startling, the coastline shown seems to depict not ice-covered Antarctica as we know it today, but the actual rocky coastline beneath the ice. A coastline that hasn't been exposed for thousands of years and wasn't accurately mapped until the 20th century using modern seismic equipment. How could a 16th century Turkish admiral have possessed this knowledge? Piri Reis himself provides a partial answer. In notes on the map, he explains that he compiled it from approximately 20 older source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He mentions using maps captured from Spanish sailors, including charts that may have been drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. He references classical sources. In essence, Piri Reis is claiming his map is a synthesis of ancient geographical knowledge, much of it now lost. Skeptics argue the Antarctica connection is coincidence or misinterpretation. The southern continent on the Piri Reis map, they say, is simply an extended and distorted version of South America, drawn in an era when the true extent of the southern hemisphere was unknown. Medieval and early Renaissance maps frequently showed hypothetical southern continents, terra australis incognita, based on classical theories that land masses must balance the known northern continents. The apparent match with Antarctica's subglacial coastline, skeptics argue, is pattern recognition run amok, seeing connections that aren't really there. But the mystery doesn't end there. Subsequent analysis of the map has revealed accurate longitudinal placements of geographic features, a measurement that was extremely difficult to calculate in the 16th century and wasn't mastered until the invention of accurate marine chronometers in the 18th century. The map also shows islands in the Caribbean and details of South American geography that Piri Reis couldn't have known from the limited European explorations that had occurred by 1513. This has led some researchers to propose that Piri Reis' ancient source maps were remarkably accurate, perhaps reflecting a level of geographical knowledge from antiquity that we've underestimated. We know the classical world had sophisticated geographers. Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference to remarkable accuracy in the 3rd century BC. Ptolemy's geography, though flawed, demonstrated impressive knowledge of the known world. Is it possible that some ancient civilization, or perhaps a network of trading cultures, possessed more extensive geographical knowledge than survived into the medieval period? There's a tantalizing historical precedent. The Library of Alexandria, destroyed in stages between Caesar's time and the Islamic conquest, reportedly contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, including maps, geographical treatises, and accounts of voyages, now lost to us. What if some of this knowledge survived, in copies, was transmitted through Byzantine and Arab scholars, and eventually found its way into the hands of Ottoman cartographers like Piri Reis? Ancient seafaring was more extensive than we once believed. Phoenician sailors circumnavigated Africa around 600 BC. Polynesian navigators crossed vast stretches of the Pacific with only celestial navigation. Viking traders reached Constantinople via Russian rivers. The Indian Ocean trade network connected Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia for millennia. If information could travel along these trade routes, geographical knowledge could accumulate over centuries, preserved in maps that were copied and recopied by successive generations of sailors. The Piri-Reis map might not show Antarctica at all. That remains the most likely explanation. But it demonstrates something equally important: that geographical knowledge in the pre-modern world was more sophisticated and extensive than our Eurocentric historical narratives have acknowledged. The map is a physical artifact, proving that lost knowledge isn't just a romantic notion, but a historical reality. Information that once existed can disappear, preserved only in fragments, hints, and legends. And if maps can preserve lost knowledge, what else might? The admiral who drew this chart believed he was working from ancient sources that showed the true shape of the world. Whether he was right or mistaken, the map remains a beautiful, mysterious artifact that refuses to fit comfortably into our assumptions of what the ancients knew and how they knew it. The Ramayana and the Flying Machines of India. The sun rises over the Indian subcontinent, illuminating temples where verses of the Ramayana have been chanted continuously for over 2,000 years. This epic poem, attributed to the sage Valmiki and dating to approximately 500 BC, though possibly preserving much older oral traditions, tells the story of Prince Rama's quest to rescue his wife Sita from the demon king Ravana. It's considered one of Hinduism's greatest texts, a tale of love, duty, and righteousness. But embedded within its poetic verses are descriptions that have fascinated and puzzled readers for centuries. Detailed accounts of flying machines called Vimanas. The Ramayana describes Ravana's aerial vehicle, the Pushpaka Vimana, in remarkable detail. It's said to be bright as the sun and mount the sky, capable of carrying numerous passengers, moving at great speeds, and traveling long distances. The epic describes it as resembling a bright cloud in the sky, maneuverable by the pilot's will, containing multiple chambers and amenities. Other ancient Indian texts, including the Mahabharata and various Puranas, contain similar descriptions of flying vehicles used by gods and heroes. For most of history, these descriptions were read as pure mythology, fantastical embellishments that made the stories more exciting but had no basis in reality. Flying machines in ancient India? Impossible. The ancients didn't understand aerodynamics, didn't have engines or appropriate materials. Obviously, these were mythological constructs, literary devices, perhaps inspired by birds or clouds, or the human imagination's eternal dream of flight. But in the early 20th century, a Sanskrit text called the Vaimanika Shastra surfaced, claiming to be an ancient manual on Vimana construction and operation. The text, supposedly channeled by psychic means from ancient sources, described in technical detail the construction of flying machines, including materials needed, propulsion systems, and flight techniques. Some researchers seized on this as proof that ancient India possessed advanced technology. The descriptions included specific metals and alloys, energy sources, and piloting instructions that seemed impossibly sophisticated for the claimed time period. Modern investigation has revealed the Vaimanika Shastra is almost certainly a 20th century composition, not an ancient text, and its technical descriptions are generally aeronautically unsound. This revelation seemed to close the case. Vimanas were myth, the technical manual was fraud, and any claims of ancient aircraft could be dismissed as pseudoscience. However, this doesn't entirely resolve the mystery. The descriptions in the genuinely ancient texts, the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and others, remain. While certainly not engineering manuals, they describe flying vehicles with a level of detail unusual for pure fiction. They specify behaviors, appearances, capabilities. They're not just mentions of magical flight, but descriptions that attempt, within the limits of ancient language and understanding, to convey something observed or imagined in concrete terms. One intriguing possibility is that these descriptions preserve distorted memories of actual observations, not of machines, but of natural phenomena that ancient peoples attempted to explain through the lens of their understanding. Some researchers have suggested that particularly vivid meteors, ball lightning, or other atmospheric phenomena could have inspired stories of divine vehicles moving through the sky. Ancient observers, lacking our scientific framework, would have interpreted such phenomena through mythological and technological metaphors available to them. Another possibility is that the Vimana descriptions represent thought experiments. Ancient engineers and thinkers imagining what flight would require if it were possible. The ancient world had impressive mechanical knowledge. The Greeks created the Antikythera mechanism, a complex astronomical calculator. Roman engineers built aqueducts that are still functional. Indian metallurgists produced the iron pillar of Delhi, which has resisted corrosion for over 1,500 years. Perhaps some ancient thinkers, observing birds and conceptualizing the principles of flight, attempted to imagine how humans might achieve the same, and these imaginative exercises were preserved in epic literature. There's also the possibility of cultural transmission across vast time spans. If we accept that complex societies existed before recorded history, as sites like Göbekli Tepe demonstrate, could some technological knowledge have been passed down through oral tradition in garbled form? The Ramayana itself is believed to describe events from a much earlier period than when it was written. If it preserves cultural memories from the end of the Ice Age, as some scholars have suggested based on geographical and astronomical references in the text, could the Vimana descriptions be extremely corrupted memories of some now lost technology or phenomenon? We'll likely never know for certain. The Vimanas of ancient Indian literature remain enigmatic. Too detailed to dismiss as pure fantasy, too inconsistent with known physics to accept as historical fact. They exist in that liminal space between myth and possibility, challenging us to think carefully about how ancient peoples recorded observations and how we interpret those records. What we can say is this: the dream of flight is universal and ancient. Every culture that looked at birds wondered what it would be like to soar. Some cultures expressed this through legends of flying gods, or magical carpets, or winged horses. The ancient Indians expressed it through detailed descriptions of aerial vehicles, imagining, or perhaps remembering, what flight might look like if it were achieved. And now, thousands of years later, we've made those dreams reality, flying in machines that would seem no less miraculous to Valmiki than his Vimanas seem to us.
The legend of the Hopi ant people, the underground civilization. The mesas of northeastern Arizona, where the Hopi people have maintained an unbroken cultural presence for over 1,000 years. Their villages perch on high plateaus, overlooking a landscape of stunning beauty and harsh conditions. The Hopi are known for their rich oral traditions, their intricate ceremonial life, and their prophecies. Among their most intriguing legends are stories of the ant people, the Anu Sinum, who saved humanity during past cataclysms by sheltering survivors in underground cities. According to Hopi tradition, the world has been destroyed and renewed 4 times, with humanity currently living in the 4th world. During the destructions of the first and second worlds, one by fire, one by ice, the ant people emerged to help. They welcomed chosen humans into their subterranean homes, providing shelter and food while the surface world was devastated. The Hopi described these underground dwellings as extensive networks of chambers and tunnels illuminated by some means, stocked with provisions where communities could survive until it was safe to return to the surface. The stories describe the ant people themselves as small, industrious beings with narrow waists and antennae-like appendages, hence their name. They taught the humans survival skills, sharing food despite their own limited supplies, embodying selflessness and community cooperation. When the catastrophes ended, the humans emerged from underground to repopulate the renewed world, carrying with them the lessons learned from the ant people. For most observers, these are clearly mythological narratives, allegories teaching values of cooperation, preparedness, and respect for those who help you. The ant people are symbolic, not literal. The underground cities are metaphorical, representing the womb of Mother Earth or the unconscious mind. The cyclical destructions are common to many cultures' mythologies, reflecting universal human anxieties about mortality and change. But then archaeologists began exploring the American Southwest more thoroughly. What they found complicated the simple "it's just mythology" interpretation. The region is honeycombed with underground and semi-underground structures. The most famous are the cliff dwellings, Mesa Verde, Canyon de Chelly, Bandelier, where ancestral Puebloan peoples built elaborate stone cities in alcoves and caves, protected from the elements. But there are also extensive networks of kivas, underground ceremonial chambers, that are central to Pueblo religious practice. Some kivas have multiple levels, connected by tunnels, forming substantial subterranean complexes. More intriguingly, there are rumors and reports of extensive natural cave systems beneath the Southwest, some of which show signs of ancient human modification and habitation. The Grand Canyon reportedly contains caves with artifacts suggesting ancient occupation, though many areas remain unexplored or off-limits. Beneath the surface of the Colorado Plateau run vast cave networks formed by water erosion over millions of years, many of which have never been fully mapped. Could the Hopi legends of underground cities preserve memories of actual refuge sites used during past catastrophes? The end of the Ice Age brought dramatic climate changes to the Southwest. Periods of extreme drought punctuated southwestern prehistory, forcing populations to migrate or adapt dramatically.
During such times, caves and underground shelters would offer protection from heat, cold, and marauding groups competing for scarce resources. The timing is intriguing. Hopi traditions speak of migrations and world destructions that, when analyzed by researchers, seem to correspond roughly to major climate shifts at the end of the Pleistocene and during the Holocene. The destruction by ice could be a cultural memory of the Ice Age itself, or of the Younger Dryas cold event around 10,900 BC. The destruction by fire might recall a period of volcanic activity or catastrophic wildfires during severe drought. Some researchers have drawn connections between Hopi legends and other cultural memories of underground refuge. Many Native American tribes have similar stories. The Navajo speak of emergence from underground worlds. The Apache have legends of cave-dwelling ancestors. The Pueblo peoples generally share narratives of migration from subterranean origins. Are these purely mythological cosmologies, or do they preserve fragments of historical memory? The ant people description itself is curious. While the narrow waist and antennae clearly evoke ants, hence the name given by later Hopi, some researchers have noted the description could also apply to humans wearing certain types of protective gear or ceremonial garb. Could the ant people have been another human culture, perhaps one living permanently underground or in caves, whom the Hopi ancestors encountered and received help from? Over time, the story becomes mythologized, the benefactors transformed into beings that are part human, part insect, symbolic of their underground dwelling and industrious nature. There's no conclusive proof of ancient underground cities beneath the American Southwest, at least none that's been publicly documented. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, particularly in a region where much of the underground remains unexplored. The Hopi have maintained their oral traditions with remarkable consistency for centuries. These aren't stories they tell to tourists. They're sacred narratives central to their cultural identity and religious practice. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between literal and metaphorical. Perhaps during times of catastrophe, ancient peoples did take refuge in natural caves and cliff dwellings, which they modified and expanded. Perhaps over generations, living semi-underground during extended droughts or climate crises, these refuges took on mythological significance. Perhaps helpful neighbors or predecessors who knew how to survive in caves were remembered and transformed into the ant people, beings who embodied the virtues of preparation, community, and selfless aid. The mesas stand silent, keeping their secrets. Beneath the southwest, in darkness, the caves wait. Some explored, most not. And in the kivas, during sacred ceremonies, the Hopi still honor the ant people who saved their ancestors when the world ended. Whether history or mythology, the message endures. Survive together, help each other, remember those who came before, and prepare for the world's changes, for they will come again.
The bygone pipes of China, the metal tubes in ancient rock. The desolate Qinghai province in western China near Mount Baigong on the northern shore of Qinghai Lake, one of the largest saltwater lakes in the world. The region is remote, sparsely populated, characterized by harsh climate and rugged terrain. In 1998, a group of researchers exploring the area for signs of ancient settlements came across something that didn't make sense: metal pipes embedded in rock formations. The pipes were found in 3 locations: inside a pyramid-shaped mound, along the lake shore, and in the lake itself. They varied in diameter from tiny toothpick-sized tubes to larger pipes about 40 centimeters across. They penetrated through rock layers, running in organized patterns, some straight, others curved. Analysis showed they were primarily iron oxide, with significant amounts of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide. They appeared ancient. The rock formations they penetrated were estimated to be hundreds of thousands of years old, based on geological assessments. The discovery sparked immediate speculation. Metalled pipes in rock that old? The implications seemed impossible. Modern humans have only been producing iron for a few thousand years. The earliest iron smelting dates to around 1200 BC in the Near East. Before that, humans used stone, copper, bronze, not iron, and certainly not iron pipes embedded in ancient geological formations. The legend that grew around the discovery suggested these were evidence of advanced ancient technology, possibly even extraterrestrial in origin. Some speculated they were remnants of an ancient industrial facility, perhaps for mining or processing. Others proposed they were part of an ancient astronomical observatory or power station. The most exotic theories suggested alien visitation, that the pipes were constructed by extraterrestrial visitors millions of years ago, for purposes we can only imagine. The Chinese government initially appeared to take the discovery seriously, with some officials publicly discussing the possibility of extraterrestrial origins. The site was developed for tourism, marketed as a mystery that challenged our understanding of history. Visitors came to see the bygone pipes, to touch the rust-covered metal protruding from ancient stone, to wonder at the impossible. Then came the scientific investigations. Researchers conducted detailed analysis of the pipes and the surrounding geology. What they found offered a more prosaic but fascinating explanation. The pipes were likely fossilized tree roots. The region where the pipes were found was once much wetter, supporting forests and abundant vegetation. Over hundreds of thousands of years, tree roots penetrated into soft sediments, which later lithified into rock. When the trees died and decayed, the hollow channels remained. Groundwater rich in dissolved minerals flowed through these channels, gradually depositing iron compounds and other minerals. Over enormous time spans, the organic material was completely replaced by iron oxide and other minerals, creating what appeared to be manufactured pipes, but were actually pseudofossils, mineral formations that took the shape of organic structures. This explanation accounts for the observed features, the varying diameters, like tree roots of different sizes, the branching patterns, how roots naturally grow, the presence in rock, where roots penetrated before lithification, and the chemical composition, consistent with natural mineral deposition, not smelted metal. Similar pseudofossils have been found elsewhere, though rarely in such well-preserved and extensive formations. The scientific explanation seems to close the case. The bygone pipes are natural, not artificial. No ancient advanced civilization, no mysterious technology, no extraterrestrial visitors. Just an unusual geological phenomenon that superficially resembles human manufacture. Yet mysteries remain. Not all the pipes fit neatly into the fossilized root explanation. Some have remarkably straight runs and consistent diameters that seem difficult to attribute to natural processes. The concentrations of certain minerals don't perfectly match what would be expected from simple groundwater deposition, and locals insist that metallic sounds can be heard when the pipes are struck. Would fossilized roots produce such sounds? There's also the question of the geological age.
If the rock formations truly are hundreds of thousands of years old, as initially claimed, then the tree roots that created the pipes would have to date from a period when the region's climate was radically different, which is geologically plausible but adds complexity. If the rocks are younger than initially estimated, it undermines the entire impossible antiquity narrative that made the pipes seem so mysterious in the first place. What the bygone pipes ultimately represent is the tension between our desire for mystery and our need for explanation. When we encounter something that looks artificial in a context where it shouldn't exist, we must choose between extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence and ordinary explanations that, while less exciting, fit the available data better. The pipes remind us that nature is an accomplished engineer, capable of creating structures that mimic artificiality. They also remind us to be careful about jumping to conclusions based on superficial appearances. Ancient astronaut theorists point to the pipes as evidence of visitation. Geologists point to them as examples of fascinating natural processes. Both can't be right, but both find what they're looking for. In the end, the bygone pipes are probably exactly what scientists say: fossilized tree roots transformed by mineral replacement over hundreds of thousands of years. But they remain on this list because they demonstrate something important about legends. They often begin with real, observable phenomena that genuinely puzzled people. The locals who first found these pipes had every reason to think they were artificial. They looked like pipes. They occurred in patterns. They seemed ancient. Only detailed scientific analysis could reveal their true nature. How many other legends began the same way, with real observations that were misinterpreted through the lens of available knowledge? The bygone pipes weren't ancient technology, but they were a legitimate mystery that required investigation to solve. And in a world before geology, before understanding of fossilization processes, before scientific methodology, how would ancient peoples have interpreted such structures if they encountered them? Perhaps as the work of gods, or ancient giants, or, if their imaginations ran that way, visitors from the stars.
The Baltic Sea Anomaly. The Structure Beneath the Waves. June 2011. The Baltic Sea between Sweden and Finland at a depth of about 90 meters. The Ocean X Team, a group of Swedish treasure hunters searching for shipwrecks using side-scanned sonar, picks up an unusual image on their instruments. At first, they assume it's a geological formation. The Baltic seafloor is littered with boulders deposited by glaciers during the Ice Age. But as they examine the sonar image more closely, something doesn't seem right. The object is roughly circular, about 60 meters in diameter. It sits at the end of what appears to be a track or groove extending for nearly 400 meters across the seafloor, as if something had been dragged or had slid to its current location. The structure has straight edges, sharp corners, and what look like regular patterns or formations on its surface. More bizarrely, there appears to be a staircase or ramp-like feature, and formations that some observers interpret as passageways or corridors. The Ocean X Team returns in 2012 with equipment for a closer look. When their vessel approaches the site, they report strange equipment malfunctions. Satellite phones stop working, electrical systems behave erratically. When divers finally reach the object, they find it covered in soot and sitting on a pillar-like formation. They report the surface feels unusual, with straight lines and right angles that seem too regular for natural geology.
They collect samples for analysis. The discovery quickly becomes an internet sensation. Images of the sonar scan spread across social media and alternative archaeology forums. Speculation runs wild. It's a crashed UFO. It's a Nazi anti-submarine device from World War II. It's an ancient structure built when sea levels were lower. It's evidence of an advanced pre-Ice Age civilization. The roughly circular shape, the apparent track behind it, the strange equipment malfunctions, all fuel theories that this is something artificial, something that challenges our understanding of history or even suggests extraterrestrial origins. The Ocean X team, for their part, remain cautiously non-committal. They're treasure hunters, not archaeologists or geologists, and they recognize they lack the expertise to definitively identify what they found. But they also recognize the publicity value of mystery. The Baltic Sea anomaly becomes their brand, attracting media attention, documentary deals, and funding for further expeditions. Mainstream scientists who examine the evidence are far less impressed. Geologists point out that the Baltic seafloor is composed primarily of glacial deposits, materials scraped up and deposited by the massive ice sheets that covered the region during the last ice age. When glaciers retreat, they leave behind a chaotic landscape of boulders, ridges, and depressions. The track could easily be a glacial groove created by a moving ice sheet, or a large boulder being dragged across the seafloor by currents or ice. The object itself could be a large rock formation shaped by glacial action, erosion, and geological processes. The samples collected from the site showed it was composed of basaltic rock and sandstone, materials common in the Baltic region, consistent with glacial deposits. There were no unusual metals, artificial materials, no evidence of construction or manufacturing. The soot mentioned by divers could be manganese deposits or organic matter, both common on submerged rocks. As for the equipment malfunctions, skeptics offer several explanations. Electronic devices can be affected by interference from geological formations, particularly those with high metal content. Human error, suggestibility, and the power of expectation can also play roles. When you're told a site is mysterious, you're more likely to interpret normal equipment glitches as anomalous. Some suggest the malfunctions were exaggerated or invented to add drama to the story. The straight edges and right angles reported by divers are more ambiguous. Natural rock formations, particularly those subjected to glacial processes and freeze-thaw cycles, can fracture along planes that create remarkably geometric shapes. Basalt columns, for instance, naturally form hexagonal patterns that look architectural. Sedimentary rocks split along bedding planes, creating flat surfaces and sharp corners. Our brains are also pattern recognition machines, prone to seeing regularity and structure even in random formations, a phenomenon called pareidolia. Yet the Baltic Sea anomaly refuses to be entirely dismissed. Unlike the Bygong pipes, where scientific investigation provided a clear, verifiable explanation, the Baltic structure remains somewhat ambiguous. It hasn't been excavated, hasn't been thoroughly mapped with modern equipment, hasn't been the subject of a comprehensive archaeological investigation. We have sonar images, some photographs, a few samples, and contradictory interpretations. This ambiguity keeps the legend alive. For believers in ancient advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial visitation,
The Baltic Sea anomaly represents potential proof. A structure that might be artificial, located in a region that was above water during the Ice Age, now conveniently submerged where it can't be easily studied. For skeptics, it's a textbook example of how ambiguous natural formations can be misinterpreted, especially when there's financial incentive to maintain mystery. There's a broader context worth considering. The Baltic Sea basin was indeed above water during the last glacial maximum. What is now seafloor was once a complex landscape of lakes, rivers, and lowlands. Human populations inhabited the region. We know this from archaeological sites on the now submerged Doggerland connecting Britain to continental Europe. When sea levels rose following the Ice Age, any settlements, structures, or features from that period would have been inundated. Could the Baltic Sea anomaly be a remnant from this drowned world? It's possible, though the evidence doesn't strongly support it. Any Ice Age settlement would likely show signs of human modification: tool marks, organized layouts, associated artifacts. The Baltic structure shows none of these. It appears, based on available evidence, to be a natural geological formation that has some unusual characteristics. But here's what makes it a legitimate mystery. We can't be absolutely certain without more thorough investigation. The ocean floor is vast and largely unexplored. Structures can exist beneath the waves that challenge our assumptions. The Mediterranean has yielded numerous submerged settlements. The North Sea regularly produces artifacts from drowned Doggerland. Waters off Japan hide structures whose origin is debated. The Baltic Sea could, theoretically, harbor remains from Ice Age cultures we've never documented. The legend of the Baltic Sea anomaly will likely persist because it occupies that tantalizing space of uncertainty. It's probably natural, most likely a glacial deposit or unusual rock formation. But the probably isn't definitely, and in that gap, mystery thrives. Until someone conducts a comprehensive archaeological and geological survey of the structure, mapping it completely, excavating around it, analyzing it with multiple methodologies, the debate will continue. And perhaps that's appropriate. The ocean floor is our planet's last great frontier, less explored than the surface of Mars. Beneath the waves lie landscapes that haven't been seen since the Ice Age, features that might rewrite history or might be just interesting geology. The Baltic Sea anomaly might be nothing, or it might be something. For now, it remains what all good mysteries should be: a question mark beneath the water, waiting for someone with the resources and determination to finally answer it.
The Drapa Stones, records of an ancient visitor race. High in the Bayan Har Mountains on the border between China and Tibet, 1938. A Chinese archaeologist named Chi Pu Tai leads an expedition into remote caves used by local populations as burial sites. What his team discovers, according to later accounts, are not just human remains, but something extraordinary. Hundreds of stone discs, about 9 inches in diameter, with a hole in the center and spiral grooves running from the center to the edge, covered in tiny, unknown hieroglyphics. The story of the Drapa stones reads like pulp science fiction. According to various accounts published decades after the supposed discovery, the discs were eventually deciphered by a Professor Tsum Nui in 1962.
The translation revealed an incredible tale. 12,000 years ago, a spacecraft from a distant planet crash-landed in the mountains. The survivors, a people called the Drapa, were stranded, unable to repair their craft. The local tribes initially feared them, but eventually accepted them. The Drapa integrated with the local population, their descendants still living in the region, as the strange, diminutive Drapa and Ham tribes, who stand apart from surrounding populations in appearance and customs. The legend gained traction in the 1960s and 70s through books by Erich von Däniken and other ancient astronaut theorists. Photographs supposedly showing the disks appeared in various publications. Researchers claimed the stones had unusual properties. They contained high concentrations of cobalt and other metals. They vibrated or hummed at certain frequencies. They showed electrical properties inconsistent with simple carved stone. Scientists who studied them allegedly suffered career damage for suggesting extraterrestrial origins. It's a compelling narrative. Physical artifacts proving ancient alien contact. A conspiracy of silence from mainstream academia. Mysterious tribes that might be descended from star travelers. The problem is that virtually none of it holds up to scrutiny. Extensive investigation by researchers and journalists has failed to verify any aspect of the Drapa stone story. The original archaeologist, Chi Pu Tai, cannot be confirmed to have existed. No records of such a person in Chinese archaeological archives from that period. Professor Tsum Nui, who supposedly translated the hieroglyphics, similarly cannot be verified. The Beijing Academy from which he allegedly worked has no record of him or the translation. The discs themselves have never been made available for independent scientific analysis. Photographs show objects that look more like modern craft items than ancient artifacts. The Drapa and Ham tribes do exist, but they're simply ethnic minorities in the region with no unusual characteristics suggesting extraterrestrial ancestry. They're shorter on average than Han Chinese, as are many ethnic groups in mountainous regions worldwide. But this is hardly evidence of alien origin. Their languages and customs, while distinct, fit well within the range of human cultural diversity in China. Most damning, the entire story appears not from Chinese sources, but from Western sensationalist publications in the 1960s. The earliest references appear in books and magazines that specialized in fringe theories and had little concern for factual verification. When researchers have tried to trace the story back to its source, they find dead ends, circular references, and eventually no credible origin point. So why include an apparently fraudulent legend in this documentary? Because the Drapa stones represent something important about how modern myths are created and propagated. Unlike ancient legends passed down through generations of oral tradition, the Drapa stone is a recent invention, manufactured in the 20th century, spread through books and magazines, amplified by the internet, and now believed by thousands despite the complete absence of verifiable evidence. The story's persistence reveals our hunger for proof of ancient advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial contact. We want to believe that we're not alone, that human history is more mysterious than textbooks suggest, that academia is hiding world-changing secrets. These desires make us vulnerable to hoaxes that tell us what we want to hear. Yet, beneath the fraudulent Drapa stone story lies a kernel of truth that makes it worth examining. Ancient peoples did create stone discs with inscriptions and symbols. The Phaistos disc from Crete, for instance, is a genuine archaeological artifact from the Minoan civilization, covered in stamped symbols that have never been definitively deciphered. Numerous cultures created stone records, cuneiform tablets, Egyptian cartouches, Maya stelae. The concept of important information being preserved in durable stone is not fantastic. It's actual historical practice. Moreover, the remote regions of China and Tibet do harbor archaeological mysteries. The region has been inhabited for thousands of years, with cultures rising and falling in isolation from the rest of the world. Some archaeological work has been done, but vast areas remain unexplored. It's entirely possible that genuine discoveries await in those mountains, perhaps not crashed spaceships, but certainly artifacts and sites that could expand our understanding of ancient Asian cultures. The irony is that by inventing the Drapa stones, hoaxers have potentially harmed the search for real mysteries. When a story is exposed as fraudulent, it casts doubt on similar claims, making it easier to dismiss genuine anomalies as probably just more hoaxes. The boy who cried wolf wasn't wrong that wolves exist, just that a specific wolf was threatening at a specific time. Similarly, the Drapa stars might be invented, but that doesn't mean all claims of unusual ancient artifacts are false. This is perhaps the most important lesson of the Drapa stones. Skepticism and open-mindedness must coexist. We should be skeptical of extraordinary claims, demanding evidence, checking sources, verifying facts. But we shouldn't be so close-minded that we reject possibilities simply because they seem strange. Real discoveries can be as bizarre as any hoax. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old analog computer, so sophisticated that when first discovered, some thought it must be a hoax or misidentified modern device. The Drapa stones don't exist, at least not as described. But the human impulse that created the legend, the desire to find proof of ancient mysteries, to connect with something larger than ourselves, to discover that history is stranger than we imagined, is real and worth understanding.
The legend of High Brazil, the vanishing island of the Atlantic. For centuries, European maps showed an island in the North Atlantic west of Ireland, High Brazil, sometimes called Brazil, High Brasil, or Brazil. It appeared on chart after chart from the 1300s through the 1800s, placed with varying precision but consistent presence. Cartographers marked it confidently. Sailors navigated by it. Expeditions set out to reach it. Yet something was strange about High Brazil. Those who sought it could never quite find it. The island appeared to move, to vanish, to reveal itself only occasionally under specific conditions. According to Irish and Celtic mythology, High Brazil was an island paradise shrouded in mist, appearing only once every 7 years. It was said to be the home of an advanced civilization, blessed with eternal youth and abundance. The island's inhabitants possessed great wisdom and hosted those fortunate sailors who managed to land during its brief periods of visibility. Some legends describe it as the realm of the gods, or the entrance to the other world, a place between the mortal world and the realm of spirits. The historical record contains numerous accounts of sailors claiming to have seen or even landed on High Brazil.
In 1480, John Jay of Bristol sent an expedition specifically to find the island, though they returned unsuccessful. Various sailors over the centuries reported sightings, an island appearing on the horizon, often with signs of habitation, smoke from fires, or even structures visible. Then, as ships approached, the island would be obscured by fog or simply disappear. By the 18th century, High Brazil had mostly vanished from maps, though some charts continued to show it into the 1800s. As European exploration of the Atlantic became more systematic and navigation more precise, the absence of any island where High Brazil was supposed to be became undeniable. The legend was dismissed as either pure myth or a case of repeated misidentification of some natural phenomenon, perhaps mirages, perhaps fog banks, perhaps real islands mistakenly placed on maps. Yet the persistence of the legend demands explanation. Why would hundreds of years of cartographers include an island that didn't exist? Why would sailors repeatedly report sighting it? Were they all lying, mistaken, or seeing something real that we've misunderstood? Modern theories offer several explanations. One possibility is that High Brazil was a misidentified real location, perhaps the Porcupine Bank, a shallow area of the continental shelf west of Ireland that comes close to the surface. In certain light conditions, shallow ocean areas can appear as land on the horizon. Another candidate is Rockall, a tiny uninhabitable islet far out in the Atlantic, though its size and location don't match most descriptions of High Brazil. More intriguingly, some researchers have proposed that High Brazil might have been a real island that no longer exists, perhaps a temporary volcanic formation that emerged and then eroded away, or a low-lying landmass exposed during periods of lower sea level that is now permanently submerged. The Atlantic Ocean is volcanically active, with numerous underwater mountains and seamounts. Temporary volcanic islands do occasionally appear. Surtsey off Iceland emerged in 1963 and remains above water, while others like Graham Island in the Mediterranean appeared briefly in the 1800s before eroding below sea level. There's also the phenomenon of Fata Morgana, a complex superior mirage that can make objects below the horizon appear elevated and visible from great distances. Under specific atmospheric conditions, these mirages can create images of islands, cities, or land masses that don't actually exist in the visible location. Sailors familiar with these phenomena might have attributed them to the legendary island, expecting to see it and thus interpreting ambiguous visual information as confirmation. But the most fascinating possibility is that High Brazil represents a cultural memory of real Atlantic islands that existed during the Ice Age. When sea levels were 400 feet lower than today, the geography of the North Atlantic was dramatically different. The continental shelves were exposed, creating new land masses. The Irish coast extended much further west. Islands that are now seamounts were above water. Recent bathymetric surveys have revealed that the Atlantic shelf west of Ireland has numerous features that would have been exposed islands during the Ice Age. Some of these would have been substantial, miles across, potentially supporting vegetation and animal life, possibly even human habitation. When sea levels rose, these islands gradually drowned. The last of them might have disappeared within human memory, within the time frame that oral traditions could preserve information about them. If human populations in the region witnessed islands slowly vanishing beneath rising seas, appearing during winter low tides, disappearing during summer high tides, finally vanishing altogether. Might this have created the legend of an island that appeared and disappeared, that could be seen but not reached, that existed in memory but not in current reality? Irish and Celtic mythology is rich with stories of sunken lands and drowned kingdoms. Lyonesse off Cornwall, Contref Gwaelod off Wales, various Irish legends of flooded cities. These traditions might preserve memories of post-Ice Age coastal inundation, actual landscapes lost to the sea transformed through centuries of retelling into mythological otherworlds. The legend of High Brazil also intersects with the broader motif of the Western Isles, the idea prevalent in Celtic and Mediterranean culture that blessed islands exist far to the west, homes of the gods or the dead, paradises beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. The Greeks had the Hesperides and the Isles of the Blessed. The Welsh had Avalon. The Irish had Tir na Nog. These might all be purely mythological constructs, expressions of the universal human longing for paradise. Or they might be mythologized memories of real Western lands, actual Atlantic islands, or, more speculatively, very distorted memories of the Americas. We know the Vikings reached North America around 1000 AD, but Irish monks may have preceded them. The Navigatio Sancti Brendani describes the voyage of St. Brendan to a promised land far to the west, encountering various islands on the way. While clearly incorporating mythological elements, some researchers believe the tale preserves information about actual transatlantic voyages. Could these real journeys have merged with older legends of High Brazil, creating a composite myth based partly on drowned Ice Age islands and partly on actual landfalls in Newfoundland or Greenland? The truth of High Brazil probably lies in some combination of these explanations. Misidentifications of real features like Rockall or the Porcupine Bank, mirages and atmospheric phenomena, cultural memories of drowned Ice Age islands, and pure mythological imagination creating an otherworldly paradise in the West. The legend persisted because it served multiple purposes: navigational marker, mythological realm, symbol of unattainable paradise, and, perhaps, dimly remembered history. What makes High Brazil a fitting entry in our catalog of legends that might be true is not that an island paradise currently exists hidden in mist west of Ireland. It almost certainly doesn't. Rather, it's that the legend likely has roots in real observations and real history, however transformed by time and imagination. The Atlantic once held lands that are now drowned. Sailors did see things they couldn't explain. Islands did appear and disappear in fog and mirage. The legend of High Brazil took these real phenomena and wove them into a narrative that served both practical needs, a cartographical reference point, and spiritual ones, a glimpse of paradise. And perhaps, just perhaps, somewhere on the continental shelf west of
The Immortal Emperor of Qin, The Search for the Elixir of Life. China, 219 BC. The first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, stands at the height of his power. He has conquered the warring states, imposed a unified legal system, standardized currency and measurements, and connected the various defensive walls into what would become the Great Wall. He has built a capital of unprecedented magnificence and is constructing a tomb complex that will take 700,000 workers decades to complete, a massive underground palace guarded by thousands of terracotta warriors.
But the emperor is obsessed with something greater than earthly power. He seeks immortality. Legends speak of islands in the eastern sea where immortals dwell, where magical plants grant eternal life. The emperor dispatches expeditions to find these islands, to bring back the elixir of immortality that will make him a god-king ruling forever. The most famous of these expeditions is led by a court sorcerer named Shu Fu. Accounts vary, but according to historical records, Shu Fu departed with a fleet of ships carrying thousands of young men and women, craftsmen, and supplies. His mission? To find the mystical Mount Panglai and retrieve the elixir of life. Shu Fu never returned. Some accounts say he failed and feared the emperor's wrath. Others suggest he succeeded in finding a new land, but chose to stay there rather than return, establishing himself as ruler of a new kingdom. The official histories are clear that these expeditions occurred. They're not legend, but documented fact. What remains mysterious is what Shu Fu actually found. Did he simply disappear at sea, shipwrecked, or lost? Did he flee to avoid punishment for failure? Or did he actually discover something, perhaps not immortal elixir, but new lands beyond China's borders? Here's where legend and possibility intersect. Some Japanese historians and researchers claim that Shu Fu reached Japan. There are towns in Japan that claim to be founded by Shu Fu, shrines dedicated to him, and local legends of a Chinese master arriving with knowledge of medicine, agriculture, and crafts that advanced local civilization. Genetic studies have shown connections between certain Japanese populations and ancient Chinese groups that could support prehistoric migration. If Shu Fu did reach Japan, what did he find there? The Jomon culture was thriving, a sophisticated hunter-gatherer society with pottery, settlements, and complex social structures. Perhaps Shu Fu encountered these peoples, saw an opportunity to establish himself as a leader rather than return to face a potentially angry emperor, and stayed. Over time, his expedition would have integrated with local populations, bringing Chinese knowledge and technology that accelerated cultural development. The story of his quest for immortal islands would have become legend, the practical reality of founding a colony transformed into myth. But the emperor's obsession with immortality points to something deeper about ancient Chinese civilization. A genuine belief in the possibility of prolonging life, even achieving immortality through alchemical means. This wasn't simply superstition. Chinese alchemists were conducting what we'd now recognize as early chemistry, experimenting with minerals, plants, and compounds to create elixirs and medicines. Ironically, many of these elixirs contained mercury, lead, arsenic, and other toxins that almost certainly shortened the lives of those who consumed them. The emperor himself died relatively young, at age 49, possibly due to mercury poisoning from the very immortality potions he consumed. Analysis of the soil around his tomb shows extraordinarily high levels of mercury. Historical records state that rivers of mercury flowed through the underground palace, and modern tests suggest these accounts are literally true. The legend of the quest for immortality intersects with another mystery, the content of the emperor's tomb. Despite knowing its location and having mapped much of it using modern technology, the tomb has never been fully excavated. Chinese authorities have avoided opening the main burial chamber, citing concerns for preservation and respect for the dead. But what if there is more to it? The historical accounts describe the tomb in terms that sound fantastical. A recreation of the cosmos with precious pearls representing stars, mechanical crossbows set to fire at intruders, the aforementioned mercury rivers. Most assume these are exaggerations, but every time archaeologists have tested claims from the historical records, the existence of the terracotta army, the size of the complex, the presence of mercury, they've been proven correct. Could the tomb contain evidence of the advanced technology medieval Chinese historians attributed to the Qin dynasty? Might there be documents, formulas, or artifacts related to the emperor's quest for immortality? Perhaps not a literal elixir of life, but medical or alchemical knowledge that was advanced for its time. The Chinese had developed sophisticated chemistry by this period, understanding distillation, creating steel, producing explosives. What other capabilities might they have possessed? There's a broader legend worth considering, that ancient China possessed scientific knowledge that was later lost. During various dynastic transitions and upheavals, libraries were burned, scholars killed, and knowledge suppressed. The famous burning of books ordered by Qin Shi Huang himself destroyed countless historical and scientific texts. Later catastrophes destroyed more. What we know of ancient Chinese science comes from surviving texts and artifacts, but how much was lost? Some researchers have pointed to anomalies in the historical record suggesting more advanced knowledge than we'd expect. The Antikythera mechanism shows that Greeks could build complex astronomical calculators. Did the Chinese have similar devices that didn't survive? The Baghdad batteries suggests ancient understanding of electrochemistry. Did Chinese alchemists stumble onto similar phenomena? The precision of some ancient Chinese metalwork suggests manufacturing techniques that seem surprisingly sophisticated. The legend of the immortal emperor and his quest for the elixir of life encapsulates humanity's eternal drive to transcend mortality. Every culture has such legends: Gilgamesh seeking the plant of youth, Pansilian searching for the fountain of youth, alchemists pursuing the philosopher's stone. These legends persist because they address fundamental human fears and desires. We know we'll die. We dream of living forever. Modern science is, in a sense, fulfilling these ancient quests. We're extending human lifespan, understanding the cellular mechanisms of aging, even experimenting with techniques that might dramatically slow or reverse aging processes. The emperor's alchemists were seeking the same goal with the tools available to them. They failed. Mercury poisoning is not a path to immortality, but their quest was not fundamentally different from modern gerontology's mission. What makes this legend possibly true is not that the emperor found a literal elixir. He didn't. It's that the quest itself was real, documented in historical records. Expeditions were launched, alchemical experiments were conducted, and one of those expeditions, under Shu Fu, may indeed have discovered new lands, founded settlements, and changed history, even if they didn't find what they originally sought. The emperor's tomb remains sealed, its secrets preserved for some future generation that might have the technology and will to excavate it safely. Perhaps when it's finally opened, we'll find evidence of what the ancient Chinese knew about chemistry, medicine, and life extension. Perhaps we'll find nothing but a poisoned corpse in a mercury-soaked chamber. Either way, the legend of the immortal emperor reminds us that humanity's greatest legends often stem from our deepest desires, and that sometimes the search itself matters more than what we find.
We've journeyed through 10 legends that straddle the border between myth and history, between imagination and evidence. From the drowned city of Zakiku rising from the waters of the Tigris, to the emperor of Qin's doomed quest for immortality, from the knowledge-bringing Anunnaki to Shu Fu's mysterious voyage to unknown shores,
From the Vimanas of ancient India to the ant people's underground sanctuaries, from inexplicable maps to vanishing islands, each story contains elements that resist simple dismissal as pure fiction. What patterns emerge from these legends? First, many involve lost lands or drowned cities, High Brasil, Zakiku, the possible submerged islands beneath the Baltic or off Yonaguni. This is no coincidence. The end of the Ice Age saw the most dramatic coastal transformations in human history. Hundreds of thousands of square miles of land, much of it prime real estate for human habitation, vanished beneath rising seas. Any cultures, settlements, or monuments on these lands were drowned, their physical evidence made nearly inaccessible, preserved only in stories that gradually transformed into myths. Second, several legends involve advanced knowledge or technology that seems impossible for the time period. The Piri Rice map's apparent accuracy, the flying machines of the Ramayana, the Anunnaki's astronomical teaching. While the literal interpretations, ancient astronauts or functional flying machines, don't hold up to scrutiny, these legends might preserve memories of knowledge that existed and was lost. The destruction of libraries, the collapse of civilizations, the interruption of cultural transmission, these events can erase sophisticated understanding, leaving only confused stories as evidence that something once existed. Third, many legends involve encounters with others, the Anunnaki, the ant people, the supposed Dropa visitors. In some cases, these might be mythologized memories of contact between different human cultures. When isolated populations encountered each other, especially if one possessed significantly more advanced technology or knowledge, the less advanced group might have perceived them as godlike or otherworldly. Over generations, real historical contact becomes supernatural visitation. Fourth, these legends share a common thread of preservation through oral tradition across vast time spans. The Hopi stories, the Indian epics, the Irish myths, all represent information transmitted verbally for centuries or millennia before being written down. We now know that oral traditions can preserve surprisingly accurate information over remarkable time periods. Aboriginal Australian stories of coastal flooding have been validated by geological evidence showing they accurately describe events from 10,000 years ago. If oral tradition can preserve memories of geographical changes over 10 millennia, what other historical information might be embedded in myths? What should we make of all this? These legends are not all equally credible. Some, like the Dropa stones, are almost certainly modern fabrications. Others, like Zakiku, have been partially validated by archaeology. Most occupy a middle ground where elements might be true, but determining which elements is difficult or impossible. The appropriate response is not blanket skepticism or credulous acceptance, but careful discrimination. Each legend must be evaluated on its own merits, examined for consistency with known facts, tested against archaeological and scientific evidence. We should be skeptical of extraordinary claims while remaining open to the possibility that our understanding of history is incomplete. The legends we've explored also reveal something about human nature. We are storytelling creatures. We preserve information through narrative. We explain the unexplained through stories. When we encounter something we don't understand, a drowned city, an unusual rock formation, an advanced artifact, we create explanations that fit our cultural framework. Ancient peoples attributed things to gods because gods were their explanatory framework. Modern people attribute things to aliens because space travel is ours. But beneath the supernatural explanations, the pattern-seeking interpretations, and the exaggerations inevitable in any story told repeatedly over generations, there often lies a kernel of observation. Someone saw something. Something happened. A city existed and was lost. A culture possessed knowledge that impressed others. An island appeared and disappeared. Expeditions set sail and never returned. These observations became stories. Stories became legends. Legends became myths. But the original observation might have been real. This is what these 10 legends teach us, that the past is far more complex than we imagine, that human capability has always exceeded our expectations, that cultures rose and fell, leaving only whispers behind, and that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, when we dismiss ancient stories as impossible fancy, we're the ones who are wrong. The archaeologist's shovel sometimes validates the storyteller's tale. Troy was myth until it was real. Vikings in America were saga until they were fact. Aboriginal flood stories were dream time until they were geology. The next impossible legend might be the next confirmed truth. We won't know until we look, until we dig, until we take seriously the possibility that our ancestors were keen observers who preserved real events in the only format available to them. So perhaps the greatest lesson of these legends is humility, recognition that we don't know everything, that history has forgotten more than it remembers, that the cultures we consider primitive might have known things we've had to rediscover, and that the stories we dismiss as fantasy might contain fragments of forgotten truth. The past speaks to us through legends, through artifacts, through DNA, through the layers of soil that archaeologists carefully sift. Sometimes the message is clear, often it's ambiguous, always it's incomplete. But it's speaking nonetheless, telling us that humanity's story is longer, stranger, and more wondrous than we've been taught. Perhaps the past was never lost, only waiting to be believed again.